The sea of faith was once too at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. But now I only hear its melancholy, long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind, down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. The chairs creaked under the three women. Montag finished it out loud. Ah, love, let us be true to one another, for the world, which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. Miss Phelps was crying. The others in the middle of the desert watched her crying grow very loud as her face squeezed itself out of shape. They sat, not touching her, bewildered by her display. She sobbed uncontrollably. Montag himself was stunned and shaken. "Shh," said Mildred. "You're all right, Clara, now. Clara, snap out of it. Clara, what's wrong?" I, I, sobbed Miss Phelps. "Don't know. I don't know. I just don't know." Miss Bowles stood up and glared at Montag. "You see? I knew it. That's what I wanted to prove. I knew it would happen. I've always said poetry and tears, poetry and suicide, and crying and awful feelings, poetry and sickness, all that mush. Now I've had it proved to me. You're nasty, Mr. Montag. You're just nasty." Faber said, "Now? Now." Montag felt himself turn and walk to the wall slot and drop the book in through the brass notch to the waiting flames. Silly words, silly, awful, hurting words, said Miss Bowles. Why do people want to hurt people? Not enough hurt in the world. You've got to tease people with stuff like that. Clara, now Clara, begged Mildred, pulling her arm. Come on, let's be cheery. You turn the family on now. Go ahead, let's laugh and be happy. Now stop crying. We'll have a party. No, said Miss Bowles, I'm trotting right straight home. You want to visit my house and my family? Well and good, but I won't come in this fireman's crazy house again in my lifetime. Go home, Montag fixed his eyes upon her quietly. Go home and think of your first husband divorced, and your second husband killed in a jet, and your third husband blowing his brains out. Go home and think of the dozen abortions you've had. Go home and think of that, and your damn cesarean sections too, and your children who hate your guts. Go home and think how it all happened, and what did you ever do to stop it. Go home, he yelled, before I knock you down and kick you out of the door. The door slammed and the house was empty. Montag stood alone in the winter weather, with the parlor walls the color of dirty snow. In the bathroom, water ran. He heard Mildred shake the sleeping tablets into her hand. Fool, Montag, fool, fool, oh God, you silly fool. Shut up. He pulled the green bullet from his ear and jammed it into his pocket. It sizzled faintly. Fool, fool. He searched the house and found the books where Mildred had stacked them behind the refrigerator. Some were missing, and he knew that she had started on her own slow process of dispersing the dynamite in her house, stick by stick. But he was not angry now, only exhausted and bewildered with himself. He carried the books into the backyard and hid them in the bushes near the alley fence. For tonight only, he thought, in case she decides to do any more burning. He went back through the house. Mildred? He called at the door of the darkened bedroom. There was no sound. Outside, crossing the lawn, on his way to work, he tried not to see how completely dark and deserted Clarice McClellan's house was. On the way downtown, he was so completely alone with his terrible error that he felt the necessity for the strange warmness and goodness that came from a familiar and gentle voice speaking in the night. Already, in a few short hours, it seemed that he had known Faber for a lifetime. Now he knew that he was two people, that he was above all Montag, who knew nothing, who did not even know himself a fool, but only suspected it. And he knew that he was also the old man who talked to him, and talked to him as the train was sucked from one end of the city to the other on one long sickening gasp of motion. In the days to follow, and in the nights when there was no moon, and in the nights when there was a very bright moon shining on the earth, the old man would go on with this talking and this talking, drop by drop, stone by stone, flake by flake. His mind would well over at last, and he would not be Montague any more. This the old man told him, assured him, promised him. He would be Montague plus Faber, fire plus water. And then, one day, after everything had mixed and simmered and worked away in silence, there would be neither fire nor water, but wine. Out of two separate and opposite things, a third. And one day he would look back upon the fool and know the fool. Even now he could feel the start of the long journey, the leave-taking, the going away from the self he had been. It was good listening to the beetle hum, the sleepy mosquito buzz, and delicate filigree murmur of the old man's voice, at first scolding him and then consoling him in the late hour of nights as he emerged from the steaming subway towards the firehouse world. Pity, Montague, pity. Don't haggle and nag them. You were so recently of them yourself. They are so confident that they will run on forever, but they won't run on. They don't know that this is all one huge, big, blazing meteor that makes a pretty fire in space, but that some day it'll have to hit. They see only the blaze, the pretty fire as you saw it. Montague, old men who stay at home, afraid, tending their peanut-brittle bones, have no right to criticize. Yet you almost killed things at the start. Watch it. I'm with you. Remember that. I understand how it happened. I must admit that your blind raging invigorated me. God, how young I felt. But now I want you to feel old. I want a little of my cowardice to be distilled in you tonight. The next few hours, when you see Captain Beatty, tiptoe around him. Let me hear him for you. Let me feel the situation out. Survival is our ticket. Forget the poor, silly women. I made them unhappier than they have been in years, I think, said Montague. It shocked me to see Miss Phelps cry. Maybe they're right. Maybe it's best not to face things, to run, have fun. I don't know. I feel guilty. No, you mustn't. If there were no war, if there was peace in the world, I would say fine, have fun. But Montague, you mustn't go back to being just a fireman. All isn't well with the world. Montague perspired. Montague, are you listening? My feet, said Montague. I can't move them. I feel so damn silly. My feet won't move. Listen, easy now, said the old man gently. I know. You're afraid of making mistakes. Well, don't be. Mistakes can be profited by, man. Man, when I was young, I shoved my ignorance in people's faces. They beat me with sticks. By the time I was 40, my blunt instrument had been honed to a fine cutting point for me. If you hide your ignorance, no one will hit you, and you will never learn. Now, pick your feet, into the firehouse with you. We're twins. We're not alone any more. We're not separated out in different parlors with no contact between. If you need help, when Beatty pries at you, I will be sitting right here on your eardrum, making notes. Montague felt his right foot, then his left foot move. Old man, he said, stay with me. The mechanical hand was gone. Its kennel was empty, and the firehouse stood all about in plaster silence, and the orange salamander slept with its kerosene in its belly, and the fire-throwers crossed upon its flanks, and Montague came in through the silence and touched the brass pole and slid up in the dark air, looking back at the deserted kennel, his heart beating, pausing, beating. Faber was a gray moth asleep in his ear for the moment. Beatty stood near the drop-hole waiting, but with his back turned as if he were not waiting. Well, he said to the men playing cards, here comes a very strange beast which in all tongues is called a fool. He put his hand to one side. Palm up for a gift. Montague put the book in it. Without even glancing at the title, Beatty tossed the book into the trash basket and lit a cigarette. Who are a little wise, the best fools be. Welcome back, Montague. I hope you'll be staying with us now that your fever is done and your sickness is over. Sit in for a hand of poker. They sat and the cards were dealt. In Beatty's sight, Montague felt the guilt of his hands. His fingers were like ferrets that had done some evil and now never rested. Always stirred and picked and hid in pockets, moving from under Beatty's alcohol-flamed stare. If Beatty so much as breathed on them, Montague felt that his hands might wither, turn over on their sides, and never be shocked to life again. They would be buried for the rest of his life in his coat sleeves, forgotten. For these were the hands that had acted on their own, no part of him. Here, was where the conscience first manifested itself to snatch books, dart off with Job and Ruth and Willie Shakespeare, and now, in the firehouse, these hands seemed gloved with blood. Twice in a half an hour, Montag had to rise from the game and go to the latrine to wash his hands. When he came back, he hid his hands under the table. Beatty laughed. Let's have your hands in sight, Montag. Not that we don't trust you, understand, but they all laughed. Well, said Beatty, the crisis is past, and all is well. The sheep return to the fold. We're all sheep who have strayed at times. Truth is truth. To the end of reckoning, we've cried. They are never alone that are accompanied with noble thoughts. We've shouted to ourselves. Sweet food of sweetly uttered knowledge, Sir Philip Sidney said. But on the other hand, words are like leaves, and where they most abound, much fruit of sense beneath is rarely found. Alexander Pope. What do you think of that? I don't know. Careful, whispered Faber, living in another world far away. Or this, a little learning is a dangerous thing. Drink deep or taste not the Pierian spring. Their shallow draughts intoxicate the brain, and drinking largely sobers us again. That's Pope. Same essay. Where does that put you? Montag bit his lip. I'll tell you, said Beatty, smiling at his cards. That made you a little while a drunkard. Read a few lines and off you go over a cliff. Bang! You're ready to blow up the world and chop off heads, knock down women and children, destroy authority. I know, I've been through it all. I'm all right, said Montag nervously. Stop blushing. I'm not needling. Really, I'm not. Do you know, I had a dream an hour ago. I lay down for a catnap, and in this dream, you and I, Montag, got into a furious debate on books. You towered with rage, yelled quotes at me. I calmly parried at every thrust. Power, I said, and you, quoting Dr. Johnson, said, knowledge is more than equivalent to force. And I said, well, Dr. Johnson also said, dear boy, that he is no wise man that will quit a certainty for an uncertainty. Stick with the firemen, Montag. All else is a dreary chaos. Don't listen, whispered Faber. He's trying to confuse. He's slippery. Watch out. Beatty chuckled. And you said, quoting, truth will come to light. Murder will not be hid long. And I cried in humor, oh God, he speaks only of his horse, and the devil can cite scripture for his purpose. And then you yelled, this age thinks better of a gilded fool than of a threadbare saint in wisdom's school. And I whispered gently, the dignity of truth is lost with much protesting. And then you screamed, carcasses bleed at the sight of the murderer. And then I said, patting your hand, what, do I give you trench mouth? And you shrieked, knowledge is power, and a dwarf on a giant's shoulders of the furthest of the two. And I summed my side up with rare serenity, in the folly of mistaking a metaphor for a proof, a torrent of verbiage from a spring of capital truths, and oneself as an oracle is inborn in us, Mr. Valery once said. Montag's head whirled sickeningly. He felt beaten unmercifully on brow, eyes, nose, lips, chin, shoulders, unflailing arms. He wanted to yell, no, shut up, you're confusing things, stop it. Beatty's graceful fingers thrust out to seize his wrist. God, what a pulse. I've got you going, haven't I, Montag? Jesus, God, your pulse sounds like the day after the war. Everything but sirens and bells. Shall I talk some more? I like your look of panic. Swahili, Indian, English lit? I speak them all, a kind of excellent dumb discourse, Willie. Montag, hold on, the mouth brushed Montag's ear. He's muddying the waters. Oh, you were scared silly, said Beatty, for I was doing a terrible thing in using those very books you clung to rebuke you on every hand, on every point. What traitors books can be. You think they're backing you up, and they turn on you. Others can use them too, and there you are, lost in the middle of the moor, in a great welter of nouns and verbs and adjectives, and at the very end of my dream, along I came with the salamander and said, going my way, and you got in, and we drove back to the firehouse in beatific silence, all dwindled away to peace. Beatty let Montag's wrist go, let the hand slump limply on the table. All's well that ends well. Silence. Montag sat like the carved white stone. The echo of the final hammer on his skull died slowly away into the black cavern where Faber waited for the echoes to subside. And then, when the startled dust had settled down about Montag's mind, Faber began softly, all right, he's had his say. You must take it in. I'll say my say too in the next few hours, and you'll take it in, and you'll try to judge them and make your decision as to which way to jump or fall. But I want it to be your decision, not mine, and not the captain's. But remember,
that the captain belongs to the most dangerous enemy of truth and freedom, the solid, unmoving cattle of the majority. Oh God, the terrible tyranny of the majority. We all have our harps to play, and it's up to you now to know which ear you will listen.